Welcome to the I'm a Practicing Musician podcast, where we explore what it means to be a practicing musician from perspectives spanning music educators to famous musicians. I'm your host, Jake Douglas, and our guest today is Stephen Nelson. How you doing, Stephen?
Doing great, and good morning.
Yeah, good morning. During Stephen's 35-year career as a middle and high school orchestra director, his middle school and high school ensembles placed first in city, state, and international competitions over 50 times, including 3 international competitions in Vienna, Austria, and a Grammy Award. It's an honor to have Stephen as practicing musician, senior director of education, and this interview is going to be simply wonderful. That's the most accomplished career that I've ever seen. It's pretty incredible. I'm excited to dive into how exactly you can do that because so many educators feel fortunate to win 1 or 2 or 3 competitions. But if that's the case over a 30-year career, it's typically that there's the perfect blend of musicians that end up in their program. To be able to replicate that more times, uh, 50 out of 35 years, that's more than once per year on average. So
Mhm.
that means that it's something that you are doing. And that's pretty incredible. So we'll hop into some questions along those lines. But first, I want to start off with a question that I'm asking every single person, which is, in your view, what does it mean to be a practicing musician?
Well, I've thought about that question quite a bit. I've come up with a couple of approaches to that, but in essence, to be a practicing musician, you're in the pursuit of something. For me, it was always in pursuit of something beautiful. That was an end product. That is, after all of my efforts and preparation, it became a performance, which is a narrative that tells a beautiful story and as sincerely and as pure as you can. Uh, but to be a practicing musician, yeah, that's what it means to me, and to accept that tireless pursuit of that beauty, knowing that that path is going to be covered with a multitude of little defeats and little successes. Um, But at the end, there will be a product that could change your life, and hopefully of the listeners too. Um, Basically, that would be how I frame it.
So this pursuit of beauty, that's we've talked about this before, not on the podcast, but I'm really interested in that. One of my favorite books is written by an author, Dan Millman, and it is called Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And it's about his mentor, who I won't give anything away because it is an excellent book. I suggest everybody read it. But there's a very specific insight that his mentor gets him to come to. And then Dan ended up writing an entire book on that insight. And the book is the title of the insight, which is There Are No Ordinary Moments.
Hmm.
So when people think, oh, I'm just going through the same motions over and over and over, no, 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 no. There's a way to enter into that beauty, which is actually being present rather than being mechanical almost. What would you say to that?
Well, you've hit upon something that's been very central to my pursuit, and everything we do as a practicing musician has to have a vision for that sound, that product. It has to be a living and vibrant thing that we're after. Uh, it got to the point where I could not play a scale or an etude without finding the opportunity for nuance, rubato, and inflection. And all my students know this, that if we're working on any one of Matus or Kreutzer, Fiorillo, or Rode etudes, it has to come alive. And so that means, to your point you made regarding Dan Millman, you have to be in the moment. You don't bring any baggage from your past, your defeats, your disappointments. You don't project, am I going to succeed into the future? No, you stay right now and be totally present in that process of trying to create something that's vibrant, sincere, and beautiful.
Mm. And so what is the process? So there's a kind of process of going from building your craft to becoming a musician, to becoming a practicing musician. And technically the whole time we're a practicing musician, but there's going to be that transition from almost forceful, very conscious, I need to move my fingers in this way. I need to move you're a string player and director, so I need to move my bow in this way, or I need to sit in this specific posture, to all of a sudden, all of that thought goes away. And it's not that it's mechanical, it's that it is, you're actually in the moment, and it is a transition from one thing to the next, devoid of thought almost. How do you teach students to be able to make that transition?
Couple of things. I need to point out that if your preparation is, if you're devoted and committed to it on a day-to-day basis, it usually takes around 5, 6, 7 years before you go from what feels robotic, and it begins to become something that you translate just by seeing the printed
Hmm.
note or manuscript. And so you find that you become more of a vessel, and your physical impairments or lack of training or lack of growth to that point are no longer so much in the way.
Yeah.
And so one must be dedicated to that process. And I experienced it. And I started very, very late. I was just before the 8th grade, but that's another story. The other thing with my students, I never teach them just notes. It cannot be that, because if you just teach notes, that's what you're going to get back.
Hmm.
So I teach them the value of playing in tune. I
Hmm.
teach them the value of having a robust, centered tone,
Yeah.
the value of having a relaxed body format and the freedom to move.
Hmm.
You cannot separate these things one from the other when you're teaching the kids. By doing so, you're holding them back.
Hmm.
I want to propel them into that world of having control of what you're doing. And this gets right back to our whole process, well, practicing musician, of teaching one concept. Stay centered, stay focused. Enough repetition that the student can incorporate these other awarenesses and really begin to find that sound and find a centered pitch. Even with our beta student, Isaiah, after what is it? It's been nearly 5 months. She's ready to be in middle school. But from the beginning, we emphasized that to get a beautiful sound, there are certain things we need to do with bow speed, arm weight, and bow track, but making them aware of it from the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's like I say when I'm teaching my class, there's no such thing as technique by itself. When we're looking at a phrase, something to do with the literature we're pursuing with our chamber orchestra, don't say we're going to do détaché or we're going to do spiccato or staccato. No, it has to fit the environment of that piece, of that phrase.
Hmm.
It has to be musically centered, not technically centered. Yes, there is a technique and a manner in which we establish for those three types of bow styles, but it still has to fit the medium.
Now, you said something really interesting to me a few months ago, which was uh, essentially the process of reading music, for example, not for example, but this is a step in the direction to increasing expression, which is you're not reading each note. You're reading groupings of notes and just taking a snapshot before moving on to the next. And you're actually looking at notes in the future while you're playing the ones in the past. And so you're always just slightly ahead, and it's these snapshots. That's what as we're building one concept upon another, we're getting more and more snapshots into how all of these essentially Legos kind of fit together. And then as we're viewing it's like when we're reading, we're not looking at a word, is how you phrased it. We're looking at a few words, and then it just streams out of us. That's why people can read so fast, because if they were reading an individual word at a time, they'd never be able to read as quickly as a lot of humans can, at least. So but then after that, you also there's something to be said about taking that next step, which is I've now learned how to play this song with the expression that I want. Now let me see if I can memorize this, because taking away that external stimulus of the sheet music, now all of my focus can go on to my musical expression, because the actual pattern or the sequence of notes is up here. Oh, you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you've touched upon a couple of issues that are critical. The first one about snapshots. This gets back to my whole premise that Barry Green uh, and Timothy Galway, Inner Tennis and the Inner Game of Music, pointed out. The snapshot is really showing the student that they do see more than the note they're playing.
Hmm.
And you'll grow this. Pretty soon they're seeing two measures. And to prove that they see it, snapshot means you take a look and you close your eyes. You keep playing, and you open your eyes and you see the next two measures. You kind of have to learn how to open your eyes and look in the right spot. But the student is immediately amazed by what they did see.
Mm-hmm.
Our brain and our eyes take in a lot more than what our mind is wanting to focus on.
Yeah.
And this is a revelation. Next level, when we're talking about a phrase and we're in the act of trying to create an expressive and musical and cogent idea or narrative, you're audiating it. You're actually singing it internally as if you're telling the story
Mm.
in your mind. And so now my body is going to follow that prescription.
Mm-hmm.
All the nuance, all the rubato, all the dynamics, all the pitch, every inflection, because it's already on board. And this is a different type of looking ahead, if
Yeah.
you will. This isn't the snapshot version. This is the creative, in control of the narration version. So there you have a couple of.
So I'm trying to think of a quote, but uh uh freedom.
You're pulling up your quotes, are you?
I'm trying to think of it.
Have some tea while you're doing that.
Yeah, please do. I can't find it, but there's a really good quote about breaking your chains, right? Freedom is just repeatedly breaking your chains, something along those lines. There's lots of quotes like that, but the there's this kind of paradox that we get into where it's like someone who is free by being able to do what they want to do would look at someone who practices music 8 hours a day and say that that's a prison. But the person who's practicing music 8 hours a day might say, well, I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper into my understanding of all of these different concepts, because there is an infinite amount of practice that can be done. So it's varying degrees of where the individual wants to get to. And then from the external point of view, maybe that looks absurd or something to someone who doesn't understand that comprehension is deepening. But the deeper that we go into it, what is happening is more authentic expression. the person is able to put more of themselves into the music, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, and to this situation that you just described, where the student is pursuing, hour after hour after hour. Well, I'll use my experience. And in my master's degree, there wasn't a day that went by I didn't practice 6 hours. I was the first one in the building, the last one to leave. Um, but those 6 hours, I'm trying to get my body out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
I get the body out of the way, and again, I'm more of a vessel for the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And that then the inner voice begins to sing even more, becomes an increased perception of what's happening musically, or what should be or can be. And then those 6 hours weren't just rote memory work or doing etudes for no purpose. Every day, every hour, every minute has a purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I focused, and that's what I did throughout the day, my 6 hours was paved with breakthroughs,
Yeah.
insight, voila moments. And those go on board. They're with you the next day.
Yeah.
And then when you play that same phrase you worked on yesterday, that experience you had yesterday, which brought you these revelations, now has totally changed that passage
Mm-hmm.
or passages. You come back next day, you start there,
Yeah.
and you move forward. And now, what is it you're going for? Is it more passion? Is it more simplicity? Is it sincerity? What is it? How are we going to play with the dynamics, or shading the intonation, or doing rubato with rhythm? And it's a never ending unfolding. You know what I'm going to say next. Spiraling experience. And I was, and still am, addicted to that experience because it just brings joy.
Yeah. And interestingly, so I interviewed a lot of our original teachers that created the video content back in 2017 and 2018, and every single one talked about that experience of, I'm going to climb up a mountain, then I get to a plateau. Even when I'm at the plateau, sometimes it feels like I'm not making progress, but what's happening is all of what I've practiced when I'm making the effort is being solidified, so that then I can continue working to move up that mountain without having to be bogged down by the thought process of the last thing that I just learned. And so when you practice 6 hours a day, that's happening multiple times a day. A lot of people practice 20, 30 minutes, but they're still going to probably get one new two topics that they have insight into every day. So
Yeah. This, uh, what do I say? It inspires another comment. It something that I, as a teacher, had to remind my students perpetually is, don't be disappointed by where you're at. Take a moment and take stock of what you did to get to where you're at. And that's a different mindset. And again, it gets back to the inner tennis, where I would not allow them to perpetuate any negative dialogue internally. Oh, yes, I got here. All right, yeah. Well, they're inspired immediately to move on
yeah.
and take accounting for what they did. And I would tell them, you write it down. What did you just learn in this session? And now we all know this. Anybody who's practiced for hours and hours, the mind races far ahead of where you're at.
Yeah.
It wants a better intonation. It wants a greater impact. It wants greater everything. And so that's why we tend to discount all these other steps that preceded this moment, but the mind is still here.
Mm-hmm.
So I taught my students, take accounting, but be grateful, be thankful that you're still discriminating your product, because you're only going to get better because of it.
No, it's a pretty phenomenal experience. I'd like to come back to that in a minute if we have time. But but my question, this segues nicely into you became a music educator because of your passion in music, almost the same as everybody else. I don't know a music educator that doesn't play at least one instrument. But my question is, tell me about your music education history as an aspiring practicing musician before you decided to make this a career.
Yeah, well, my great grandmother had a piano, and they had this beautiful old, it was a mansion in its day. And it would be out in what they called the parlor. And I would go out there when I was, knee high, and I would discover that putting certain keys down together created these really lush, intoxicating sounds, little chords and things. And then as that went along, if I saw a movie or something that inspired me, I would go home and on the piano recreate the soundtrack part of it. I still remember doing Ben-Hur after seeing Ben-Hur, the one with Charlton Heston. And I was so proud of that. I would get my parents, come in, you got to hear this, Anyway, there's kids all over the planet who do those sorts of things, but that's what I did. And then I began to beg my parents, could I take piano lessons? So in the third grade, I got to start. And I saw a movie. It's A Song Without End. It's about Franz Liszt. Of course, I was intoxicated by that. All musicians were my idols. All artists, whoever I heard play, they were at the top of my list. So I remember the Hungarian Rhapsody #2. And my mom happened to be taking lessons. She was, far ahead of me at the time. So I'm in the 5th grade to see the movie. And I come home and I'm looking in her book. She's 3 years ahead of me on piano lessons. And voila, I find the Hungarian Rhapsody #2 by Liszt. I've been playing just over 2 years. I sat down and learned that thing in a month and then played it in recital. And my teacher says, you have a promising career as a concert pianist. I wasn't prepared to hear that. But has been the case, and throughout my life, I got a lot of verbal support and encouragement. But, and that's all part of the journey too. But I wanted to become a performer. I wanted to play. And so I got to the 7th grade. I left out a part. I took a violin class in 4th grade beginning. And I knew the guy that was teaching the class, and God rest his soul, he was a great guy. You'll hear about it in just a moment. I'm out for track. I've got my clothes. I'm getting ready to walk over to my dad's business. Give me a ride home. And here's that teacher who I participated in that class for about 8 weeks. And he didn't know much about the violin, and I knew it. And maybe I was full of myself, but I just put the violin in the closet and it stayed there for the rest of the 4th grade, the rest of the 5th grade, all of 6th grade. Never touched it in the 7th grade until the very end of the year. So I'm walking home, as I said, after track practice, or walking down the hallway, and there's Del Chinberg, the band director. That's why he didn't know anything about violin. He was the band director at the middle school, or junior high, as we call it back then. He says, Steve, what are you doing? I said, I'm just going home after track practices. He says, you should have kept playing the violin. I said, no, I'm a pianist. That's what I said. And he says right away, Steve, you have talent. Bing! It's like Obi-Wan Kenobi. This actually happened. He says, Steve, this is true. I mean, still, I'm flabbergasted by it. He says, I'm going to go to the office right now. I'm going to change your schedule. So you bring your violin tomorrow, and you're going to go to 7th period B orchestra with Mr. Culver. Don't forget. I went home, got the violin out of the closet, started working on my D major scales and what I could remember, my little 4th grade exercises. And I took that thing next day proudest punch. I already knew something special was happening. I walk in this class, we met on stage. There's Bob Culver, if you know, he's famous. I had him for 2 years. In fact, he's the guy that got me back to Michigan for my doctorate. But anyway, they said, Steve, you sit right there. Last chair, second violin. No problem. I was scared spitless. And they kind of warmed up a little bit, did a D scale or whatever. And then they said, get out the old masters. And they had a folder for me. My name's on it. Gosh, I'm being treated like a prince. Open it up. I get out. They said, turn to page 12. It's Schumann's Chorale. So I opened it up. But okay, here we go. Start to play. And it's all half notes. Thank God. Going really slow. I had a chance I could prepare the note before I got to it. I didn't make it 3 measures. And I didn't even know that this was happening. I put the violin down. I put the bow across my lap. And it's hard to tell the story. I was crying like a baby. I was overcome. In the 4th grade, there were just 4 violins in my class. That's all I heard. Now I'm hearing string bass, cello, viola, second violin, first violin, and all this thing becoming a structure and a sound, and it just went right through me. And in that instant, I knew what I was going to do the rest of my life. That's how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is just aftermath to that moment. Everything goes back to that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. That's a lot of the top tier musicians that I have interviewed or that I know have similar experiences of just practicing, doing whatever, and then all of a sudden I've heard it described as everything, the third dimension kind of melts away and it's just the energy of the music is there and they're one with it, which is kind of what I'm hearing you say, is it's like everything kind of just went through you and you finally realize this is, well, as you were talking about before, this is the presence. And I think that's a really important concept to explore now, because what is presence? Like, let me ask you that. What is presence?
You mean in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, like, so different spiritual traditions have different ideas of presence. We talk about being like, oh, I'm in class, I'm present, but there's different depths to presence as well. And so what is this? What is the concept of even being present?
Are you kind of alluding to the fact that the present has many layers, like an onion, and you can peel away one and you get to a different awareness, and that all this is happening in that moment that you exist or are aware?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
I mean, almost, yes, it's onion or different dimensions. If you're sitting there and you're in middle school, were you in middle school at that time? Were you
that was, yeah, junior high into the 7th grade, right at the very end.
junior high? So you're in junior high and you realize this is what you're going to do with the rest of your life. That's something like bending space time. That's like seeing the future, right? You're like, I know that this is what I'm going to do. And it's happening all in the present moment, where everything that we think of as the third dimension and even the fourth dimension in that case with time just melted away, and you're like, nope, this is who I am. I'm present. I'm here. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, there's now I'm getting closer to where you're going. Well, music has always done that to me. My uncles tell me about when I was 2 years old and I was sitting in front of the Motorola, the old record players,
Mm-hmm.
and I was crying, and they couldn't figure out what it was, but there was an opera record, La Boheme, was on the turntable, and I was listening to it. And music has always had this effect on me. It just goes through me.
Mm-hmm.
So in that moment when we are experiencing the beauty, the magnanimity, it's a universe.
Hmm.
When I listen to Mahler, he's describing his reality in these broad, incredible proportions and depth, and he takes me there. Uh, then I was listening to Fritz Kreisler this morning. Fritz, his and he was one of my idols when I was young. I loved playing his music. He's this Austrian guy that would, if he's waiting on the deck by the train before he boards, people would recognize him. He'd get out his violin and stand on a little wooden box and play his music and just transport these people. This is prior to World War One. But his music is such a sweet, incredible narrative. He's telling us about the world as he sees it. And it's so sincere and so folksy, so genuine. But each composer has their own flavor, their own aura they create.
Hmm.
And so, like I talked with Karen Ray, she's cellist in Louisiana Philharmonic. I just talked to her the other day, and I said, isn't it tough to decide who your favorite is? She says, yeah, I just tend to immerse myself in the works that we're preparing for the next program, and I become one with them. And that's basically what you do. You go there, and because their presence permeates,
Yeah.
that's where you go. That's what you are. That's what you're doing. And there's no time. There's no calendars, no nothing. There's just that expanded moment,
Hmm.
which every composer captures in their own inimitable way.
Hmm.
I don't know if I answered your question though.
Well, you did, and I want to hone in on one word that you said specifically, which is the universe. Let's even look at like etymologically, what that means is a single verse, right? There's like harmonic spheres cosmologically about how the entire universe is fit together. But when we look at it and we look at how we fit into the single verse and the different I mean, we could get really deep into cosmology and theosophy and anthroposophy and different spiritual traditions that really try to describe the interrelatedness of all of the seemingly external world, and then how underlying everything, it's just vibration, which is, the same thing as sound. But that's one thing that I really have noticed with the presence is, okay, what is music doing? Music is I'm syncing what my mind is hearing with my breath, which is Latin spiritus means breath. So my spirit, what I'm taking in and then taking out, that music coming in, and then how I'm expressing myself in relation to it, based off of my mind, and then utilizing my body to make that happen. And so that union of the mind, body, and spirit with other mind, bodies, and spirits, with what they're doing with their external stimulus with this instrument, then creates this pretty much wrapped communion, which is one of the reasons why music is so prevalent in worship. So that, and then that frequency that's emitted is something that can attune the people who are just listening to it to the intentions of both the composer, as you're talking about, but also the interpretation of the composition by the musicians who are performing it at that time. Because you can hear a piece played 100 different ways.
Yeah.
And so that's, as a practicing musician, that's been one of the most fascinating things to me is, how do I enter that moment in a way that I have these things that I typically think of as my mind, body, and spirit, but how are they going to be in such a union that there's only presence and there's the thought is gone. It's the music that's outside of me blended completely with what I'm doing with it, so that then it's just one thing, that universe where we're a single verse happening at this time. And I'm just immersed in it, kind of like you were talking about.
That's what
Um,
music can do.
yeah,
Music is one of, it's like the universal language, to use the universe again.
yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing like it.
Hmm.
Some people might argue you could go into a museum of art, and, and see different things and different paintings, and it creates some kind of a, an aura. I mean, undoubtedly, it creates an aura for that person. But music, it tends to get more people to coalesce in a more parallel direction
Yeah,
than anything else. And as you spoke about, all these people, intertwining their accumulative efforts. One thing I taught in my classes forever was that I'd always start the year with this. We could have the sum total, and we'd have a number, how many people are in this room, in this ensemble. But when you play and when you sacrifice the time and energy that we're going to sacrifice to find the beauty and more meaning through this piece, the sum total will be greater than the number of participants, because there is another energy, and I call it synergy. And I believe that's the definition. There's another participant there, and it's that energy source. And I'm, forever, and I don't want to get too far afield here, but I believe that the strongest force in the universe is love. And it is all powerful. It can conquer anything, it can heal anything. But when you have all these people working together, coalesced for this to bring to audible fruition, there's not an angry thought in the bunch. It's all about together. And it's something that, as I said, I don't know anything else that can do that. I know there's people who participate in team sports that say they have similar experiences. But music is so focused. We have all these people doing different tasks, but the focus, it's hard to imagine it being like that in anything else.
yeah. Well, the neuroscience, the hard sciences are now able to track what's happening in the brain, and they are confident that music has more active areas of the brain, more active neural connections happening simultaneously than any other activity.
I'm not surprised.
So
I'm
it's pretty
convinced of that.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so let's see what so we talked about why you chose music education as a career. We talked about your history teaching new practicing musicians. Um, what advice would you give someone who's just starting their journey as a practicing musician? Let's take this in two different types of people, because there's a whole spectrum in between. But someone like you who you couldn't do anything else. You from age 2, you were immersed in the music and you started playing the piano, and that was just you were drawn to it. To somebody who likes listening to it but never really has been, but like maybe this would be interesting to do, but I don't really know, maybe I'll pick up an instrument, see what happens. So not super drawn to it, but is just looking for an activity. What advice would you give to those two different types of aspiring practicing musicians?
Well, the first being the one that's already somehow immersed in it just by the act of listening to great music, like it happened for me. Gee, uh, you better listen. Don't be afraid of what you love. You may get to do that for a profession. You might even get paid. for doing that and helping others to participate. But don't be afraid of what you love. The other one who's just on the periphery, but they listen and they wonder. Of course, they've got another thread in their life that they've already been pursuing, another profession, another form of employment and garnering a wage. Yet every now and then they think, "Gosh, I wished I'd played piano," or "Gosh, I wonder if I could learn that riff on the guitar." The answer is yes. You take your dream, which has some connection to a passion. To what degree that varies. But I encourage those people. We have this thing we call YouTube. You can begin to explore the rudimentary steps to playing the piano. Or you could go on and find that guitar riff, and you can find it now slowed down to 10% of the performance speed, and you can have visual tutorials. You can do this. And I exhort my students, and I would exhort those people, give it a try. I would just caution, make sure you go slow and do little bits, because if you do, you will succeed every day.
Well, and that's, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, that's what really sets your teaching career apart, is the fact that you were able to replicate your accomplishments repeatedly throughout the course of your career, so much so that you won competitions more than one time per year. That means, and we have to, it's really important for listeners to understand that not everybody who went into Stephen's classes was immersed in music from age 2. There's a lot of people who it's like, well, I need an extracurricular activity, or, maybe I'll do this instead of visual art or something. But you turn them into top performing musicians. So you don't have to have that immersive component, that magnetism drawn to the music, to be able to perform at that high level. If it's just something that you're like, well, I need something to do, you have the potential of becoming, of finding that beauty.
Yeah, that's what I told them every day. A couple of things that are very necessary to have. Remember, I said, don't be afraid of what you love. And everything you do, you have to find your passion. It was obvious to me that I had this passion to make music. I didn't want to become a teacher.
Yeah.
Music education was calling me, and it kept showing me, these little doors kept opening. But anyhow, into the actual teaching phase, I encourage and I exhort, and I never, ever was afraid to show my passion, my love, my energy. My hair is on fire. And then it became apparent to me that this is on my watch. These people are my responsibility. I have to show them how to get there. So what I tell all of my student teachers is, you have to know your craft. You have to know it better than you could ever imagine knowing anything, because you're going to use that craft, that ability to play and communicate with your instrument.
Mm-hmm.
You'll model with that trained ability, and they'll understand just through the sound of it.
Yeah.
Of course, I learned all the instruments in order to take away excuses, as I would say. But yeah, passion, encouragement, exhortation, sequencing skill acquisitions. Those kids, they would come running into the classroom. They said it was their favorite class. I was always happy to hear that, but I say, oh, come on. But let's get started. And the junior high kids and middle school kids, I would tell them early in the year, now look, if you get here, if you get here really fast during passing time, you're going to have another 2 or 3 minutes, to unpack and warm up. You know what that's going to represent if you do that every day for a year? We're going to get 3 more weeks of class time. And so they would come piling into the room every day and they would get their instruments out and, and I'd go around tapping them on the shoulder. Don't forget, stay relaxed here. And okay, no more extension there. Now just keep moving. Or I might be practicing when they came in. And I'd be playing the piece that they were working on and they get to hear it in real life. Or the first student that came in, I said, get unpacked. I want to sit down and work with you on that spot. So every other student that came in saw me and that student working, pursuing. And that's how it went right up to the bell. And I was the worst teacher in every building I taught in. I rarely did I give the kids enough time to pack up at the end of class. The bell would ring right in the middle of some spot. And they would, what? And I would go, what? Yeah, I need to watch this because I always got these complaints from the other teachers. Nelson, let the kids pack up, would you? But, once the bell rang, that's what I tell all my student teachers. Once the bell rings, my world, I'm done. I'm right there, 100% for them. And the time always flew by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well,
that's to even sustain that degree of focus and attention for a 35-year career. And then plus you've been mentoring as well since that time and kind of at the end of your career as a director as well, you were mentoring. You want to talk a little bit about that?
the mentoring?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's my passion these days because after being, actively teaching it's been 50 years since I started teaching. Um, yeah, the passion is based on the fact that, we all have limited time on the planet. Me, a lot more than these young folks. Anyway, I'm not going to forget. I don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that in teaching. If it works, I'm keeping it. I didn't care if it was old school, new school, or whatever. If it was right and it worked, we did it. That became part of our repetition, our spiral.
Mm-hmm.
So I was asked to help these several struggling teachers at the high school level. And so first I taught them how to do a warm up. And then I'd come back 2 days later and I'd ask the kids, did they do the warm ups? And they'd look at their teacher and he'd go like this. Okay, get out the warm ups. You know me, you have to always go from your foundation and then up. So we got them to get their warm-ups. Then I taught them how to sequence an acquisition. How do you teach a skill? How do you teach an awareness? You do it in steps from simple, 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 simple. And that creates the big picture, which is complex when you put it all together. The students saw this happening. The teachers saw it happening. And pretty soon they finished fifth in state. The other orchestra finished. What did McNary finish with Sean? Third or fifth? Oh, Karen's wondering if I'm asking.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think McNary finished third. And then the next year, Jim at McKay, they finished third. And these are two schools that sometimes couldn't even qualify to get to state. Then they show up and they finish in the top 5. Well, this was unheard of. Well, all we did with both of them was introduce the process. They're both very, very fine gentlemen and really cared about their kids. But I had to show them that there's a process and there's a structure and we need to be faithful to it. And they did. And one of them's retired by now. But the mentoring brought me great joy. I got to be very close with all those students, and they really appreciated it. They're so sincere. I remember some kids asking me, could I be their godfather musically? And could they bring all of their musical issues to me? I said, well, sure, whatever I can do. Mentoring, I love it. It's when that bell goes off and I'm in a classroom. But the mentoring thing is, that's structured for me too. I won't do anything that first hour. I'm a fly on the wall. I see how they do it, what they're doing, what they're not doing. And then I prescribe some things for the next day. Usually the first part of the class, how do you start the class? How do you do your warm-ups? How do you do your wood shedding? How do you break down the wood shedding? How do you rebuild it? But that takes days and weeks. It doesn't happen at once. And you never want to exceed your student teacher's ability to layer their awarenesses.
Yeah.
Don't go too fast. It's not a professional golfer's lesson.
But even those we've talked about are not structured correctly. So, no, this is one of the reasons I wanted to work with you, is because of your understanding of how humans acquire knowledge and skill sets. We, in developmental psychology for over a century, have known, and for much longer in non-Western thought, but having attained my degree in psychology, we have Piaget, we have Erickson, we have an understanding that at certain kind of associated with ages, there are specific developmental evolution that happens within individuals. And it's really easy to understand by looking at a baby where for months they can't really do anything, can't even hold their head up. Then they can just hold their head up, and that's like a few weeks. Then they can they'll be on their stomach, and then maybe they can roll over, and that's another few weeks. Then they can roll over, then they can shuffle, crawl one little shuffle, then two little shuffles, then four, then maybe they can get up on their knees. Then maybe they can hold them for a few weeks. That's all they can do. Then they hold themselves up with support while they're standing on their feet. Then they take one step while they're holding themselves up with support, then two steps. Then maybe they let go of the support and they keep falling down. But this process takes a very long time, and it's sequential, and it happens in every single human being. And it's the same thing with speech. We babble first, and then we single syllables that aren't words, then mama, dada, whatever, single half portions of words, and then single actual words, then stringing two words together. And then years later we learn how to write NA, one letter, and then the second letter, and we spend however long writing each one of those letters, and then we do 2-letter words. And then for some reason in music, we don't do that.
Oh, we do.
Or a lot of people don't do that, I should say. A lot of people don't do that. But that's why I was interested in working with you, is because that's exactly, we structured ours based off of those principles. We think because human beings get older and they have more neurological connections that's oh, well, we can just introduce more complexity faster. It's no, we can learn the foundations quicker, but you still have to go through all of those foundational phases. We do have more neural connections that are strengthened so that, yeah, learning how to hold my instrument, I might not have to repeat that for weeks at a time, like I did as a baby when I was learning how to crawl, but I still have to learn how to hold it properly. And that's the only thing I should be doing when I'm doing that. I shouldn't learn how to hold it and hold my bow and make a sound and learn about rhythm and learn how to read it on a page and learn how to sit straight up and all of those things. It's way too much information.
You've touched upon some very critical things. Going back to the infant, I used to tell my students, especially after I found Timothy Galway in the inner game of tennis, I tell the students, it's like being on the outside of a cyclone fence with your fingers in the wire and you're looking at the game on the other side. And you want more than anything else to have somebody ask you to get in the game. That's what it's like. You want to create that type of attraction or environment for your students. Because looking at the infant, every time they fell down, did they say that was a defeat? No, that's knowledge. It was something that inspired them to try it again.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the adult and all of the past we've got stored up there. They see that as a failure when they try and it didn't work. They're afraid of failure more than they're willing to accept the potential for success.
Yeah.
This is a switch that we have to shut down in the more adult student. And how you do that, you never discriminate with the word no. You don't say that in a lesson. You immediately provide the positive goal to replace their last effort, just like the infant did when they tried to stand up alongside the coffee table and take another step.
Yeah.
They want the next part of the game. And the game for the infant, oh, golly, I can string 3 steps together. The adult, once you get them to reprogram, let their past go away and all of the negative discrimination they've had tossed at them and they do to themselves, Shazam, they're on the road again.
Mm-hmm.
They learn the same as a child, but to your point, they have a lot more things that are naturally on board, which they can take advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have to flip the switch. And that's why I've always believed adults, they can learn faster if they stop the negative discrimination.
Well, so I have a lot more questions, but we're almost out of time. I'm going to ask one more because that segues very nicely, and we're going to have you come back here when we can, because there's so much more that I want to talk about and that I think people need to hear from you. But the last question is, what message would you like to convey to people who appreciate music but hesitate to become a practicing musician because they feel it's too late, or they're not talented enough, or practicing music requires too much discipline, or they just fundamentally have gotten rid of, or they've heard no too many times, and that's now how their operating system works?
Well, I think I touched upon that in my last comment or comments, that we need to flip the switch. We need to show them that success is only an instant away.
Yeah.
And by giving them a portion of the total task or total skill, to give them an aspect of it that they can manipulate. Remember, when they can manipulate that concept, they own it. And that's when they get to experience, what is it? My favorite word, success.
Yeah.
There's nothing sweeter than growth and success. And at that point, they're going to go the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Promise you.
I think that's a really critical point. A lot of the way that our society is run is manipulating and owning other people. And when you become a creator, when you're in the image of God, and you're created in that image of God as a creator, you're
Mhm.
only trying to own your own limitations.
Right.
That's really, really important for people to understand, because there's a whole lot of people that are just trying to control everything outside of them rather than control what's inside of them, and become more able to become immersed in what is outside of them, rather than telling what's outside of them that they're wrong, and that, yeah.
These people who have discovered that about manipulating their craft,
Yeah.
they end up becoming an example without saying a word to everybody around them.
Yeah.
Because their skill and their craft continually grow, and other people get to witness it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a marvelous point. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So thank you so much for your time, Stephen. Definitely going to have you come back. I want everybody to know that Stephen is, again, our practicing musicians, is what I mean by our practicing musicians, senior director of education, working for the past over a year now to make sure that our micro tutoring service is affordable so that we're opening up access to private lessons to more people who otherwise would not be able to access a teacher. It is also very efficient and effective, as he has learned by being the beta test teacher. And Stephen currently has slots open to take students violin, viola. And would you do upright bass and cello too, or mostly just violin and viola?
If it was relegated to the fundamental levels, up to middle school, but you know me, I prefer to be in that phylum where my expertise has
Yeah.
been established. And so violin and viola. Uh, but you've got the program set up so well that, the elementary level, yes, I could do those too, but I got to be careful not to get too busy. We got to do all those video tutorials.
We're going to get very busy here, so we'll talk after the interview. But the other thing that I want to mention about Stephen is he does offer mentorship through practicing musician as well. This is one-on-one personalized mentorship. It can be, and it would be preferable to be in the classroom with your students so that you can learn the proper sequencing. And this likely isn't, if you're a teacher who has felt like, why aren't my students learning at a specific level, it's probably not even your fault. It's the teachers that you've had. It's various things. There's a lot more recent educational and psychological research into how humans learn, and it takes a while for that to disseminate down through the academic institutions. So this is not a knock on your abilities or anything. We just want to make sure that because we do have all of that incorporated into our mentorship program, that an expert with an accomplished career such as Stephen can provide that mentorship to you. And so visit practicingmusician.com. And let's make sure that we can, as we all know, the fundamental reason for doing this is for the students. And so let's give our students the best possible music education that they can. Is there anything you want to say to close out the interview here?
I was just going to say bravo.
No. Yes. Bravo.
Yeah. I would very much love to be in your classroom. I would love to be of assistance and support and create more assets for you and show you if that's what you need.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, we will reconvene next Friday at 10 o'clock. We have another great guest, and we will have Stephen on again soon. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back. It's ended.